Welcome back, everybody, to the Athletic NBA Daily. Joined alongside me is Eric Koreen of the Athletic, who covers the Toronto Raptors for us here. We're both decently well-versed in Raptors world, Raptors land, I would say. Eric, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you, S?
I'm good. I'm good as well. Look, it was a, I don't want to say uneventful offseason for the Toronto Raptors because something major did happen and we will address it. But in terms of like roster moves in general, nothing crazy unless you are very, very high on Sandro Mamukelashvili, which after Eurobasket, maybe that is the bandwagon you're jumping on. But I think the major story for this team in the offseason, Brandon Ingram, who we haven't seen play for the Raptors yet. And the other one is the firing of Masai Ujiri, who was a tentpole of this organization for a very, very long time, obviously was instrumental in helping the Raptors build a championship team in 2019. In comes Bobby Webster, or at the very least, up goes Bobby Webster in the totem pole, whatever you want to call it. So he is now the head of basketball operations, not technically president. How do you sift through that specific thing that happened this summer? Does the does the roster change at all? I mean, like, does your opinion on the roster, does your opinion on the long-term vision of this Raptors team change, knowing that there's been a bit of a shuffling of the deck in the front office?
Not really. If they would have changed front offices entirely and gone away from, and that's not to say Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster are the same person. Obviously, when you are the final voice, some different decisions will be made. But they were, I think it's fair to say, philosophically aligned.
Yeah.
And Webster, you know, as you can see by sort of the Jakob Poeltl extension, is part of a big part of why the Raptors look as the Raptors look. I think if you want to understand the Masai Ujiri firing, and we don't need to call it anything else, despite Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment's best efforts to do so,
right?
It's probably a personality and a money thing. Edward Rogers, I don't think we have time to explain the complexities of the MLSE Rogers and Bell board structures, but Edward Rogers, who has become the most important person in the Raptors ownership after being sort of tied for second for several years, had an issue with Masai Ujiri's contract negotiation last time around in 2021. He was overruled. There was some animosity, and Masai got a big contract. And with 1 year remaining on Masai's contract, it's obviously lame duck. You can't be a lame duck general manager, president, head of basketball operations, or else the world will end. And so it came time to either, you know, I don't think Masai Ujiri was about to take a $10 million pay cut. And I don't think Edward Rogers was about to offer him a 4-year extension of the same contract. So I think that's essentially why the change happened. Webster will get a chance to put his own mark on his team, but I wouldn't anticipate things veering wildly off the course they've already been on.
Yeah, at least for the next couple of seasons, because Webster himself got a contract extension. And so he'll likely see through the next few seasons at the very least to see how this roster plays out, how this team performs. Also, Darko Rajakovic got a contract extension as well, or an extra year added on, which is part of this whole, in the next couple of years, this team needs to turn competitive. How do you view this team heading into next year? I actually haven't got your thoughts on this. We haven't got a chance to speak about it, but it feels like after the year that they had, falling in the draft lottery, ending up with Colin Murray-Boyles with the 9th pick, they had an injury-riddled season last year that sort of led them down that path of tanking and trying to vie for lottery odds. How do you view this team heading into this year?
I'm at once not as down on the sort of cumulative talent on this roster as I think a lot of people who follow the league are, and also deeply skeptical about its top end ability.
Yeah.
I would not have made the Brandon Ingram trade. And I just think, and I don't discount that they got him at a pretty cheap acquisition cost.
Yeah. At a discount, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But given what we saw and how the free agency played out with only one team wielding cap space and that team basically renting it out for draft picks so they can draft, 5 point guards, the Ingram's 3-year, $120 million deal looks pricey. And it's okay to have those contracts on one of those contracts on the books, but Emmanuel Quickley's contract is also not great. And Scottie Barnes' contract could be good. I didn't have a problem with it at the time, but I think he still has to play himself up to the level of it. I think that's fair to say. And you add in RJ Barrett and then the extension for Pirtle. I think it's just a very expensive group for a very expensive bill for a group that doesn't necessarily fit the way I'd love it to. I think a lot of this is going to come down to Emmanuel Quickley's health and ability as not to just be a shot maker, but sort of an offensive floor raiser for people beyond himself. And here's what I'll say about Ingram. The trade, he addresses a lot of Scottie Barnes' offensive deficiencies, like the ability to give the guy the ball and have him make some difficult shots is sort of what Scottie Barnes game. Like that's not what Scottie Barnes is. He's more of a play up pace, up tempo, handle the ball, screen and make decisions quickly. But he's not somebody you necessarily want picking apart the defense at the end of the game. And I think Ingram gives them a little bit more of that, where they can go from dreadful in the half court to average in the half court. But overall, I felt at the time that trade put a sort of a cap on what they could be, and the contracts that they've given up since haven't really. I don't think they've been of great team value, and that is it's worrisome looking forward.
No, it is, and it makes it a lot more difficult to build out. Like you're banking on some of these younger players in their rotation to really have them win on the margins, right? Grady Dick, who will be up for extension in a couple of years. Jacoby Walter, same thing. We'll see what happens with the Jamal Shed, Ochai Abaji, Jonathan Mobo, Jamison Battles of the world, who they're big fans of from last year's rookie class. But just generally, like they are hoping they can win on the margins with those type of players. And that's the way that they maneuver being an expensive team. That's a lot of pressure on a lot of these young guys to turn into real NBA players for a team that's trying to win. And I think to your point about Ingram, the Raptors were basically at the bottom of the league in every offensive category, like pick and rolls. They were not an efficient pick and roll team. Isolations, obviously not a high isolation team. Handoffs, I think the only thing they were decently good at was offensive rebounding, and that was just because they wanted to win the second chance battle as much as possible. I think Ingram will elevate that. And part of the contract conversation with Ingram generally will be how healthy he can be, because that's been a huge question mark for him moving forward. And he obviously didn't play, so we don't have a real gauge of how healthy he is or how ready he'll be. The Raptors have told us for the most part that, he will be expected to play this season, and he's progressing along well with that ankle. The main thing here is health. And to your point about alleviating some of that stress off of Scottie, I think that's a great point, because we saw it with the efficiency drop when Pascal Siakam got traded for Scottie. Scottie was just asked to do so much more of the creation. And I think one thing that this team sorely needs is someone who can create in a pinch. And that's the sell on Brandon Ingram as a Toronto Raptor. That's probably the most you could say about it, though, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're looking at the upside, you're looking at a healthier year for Ingram and a healthier year for Quickley, and them playing near the best versions of themselves. Because like I'm still very high on Scottie Barnes, and I think people who are lower on him probably discount a lot of the things he does just all over the floor. I thought, like, if he were on a better team, he would have got some if he were on a better team and he played with the intensity he played with defensively for the second half of the season, he would have got some all defense buzz.
Absolutely.
And I think he's that level of defender. And he's unselfish as a offensive player. Like, that's something you love, but he obviously, there's that 0 level scorer bit that went out before he was drafted. And I don't think that's true, but that's not the strength of his game. And that means you need these two guys who you've paid both in terms of what you've sent out and the money you've given them, in Quickly and Ingram, to be wingmen in the best ways that they can be. And I think Quickly as a spacer and shooter is going to be really important, but sometimes it's going to have to be him creating. And obviously the same goes for Ingram. Whether those were the chances they should have taken with the assets they had, that's a longer conversation.
Yeah. What is the rotation for this Raptors team next year? Because I was trying to do it today. I honestly was. I was like trying to sift through this random simulator that helps you work out the rotation online. You could convince me they have like a 10-man rotation and 2 guys on the bubble, but that's maybe the optimistic look at things. What do you think this Raptors rotation looks like next year?
Yeah, so I did a story just before I went on vacation that was sort of simulating the rotation. And, what I led with was, this is all very stupid because players will get injured immediately. So, I did the same thing last year. And I think RJ Quickly was hurt before camp. RJ Barrett was hurt in the first preseason game. And from there it went. I think they'll start with the 5 paid players. So Barrett being the 5th. I'm not sure if I've mentioned him, but, I'm not sure if that's the best long-term fit, but I think for NBA reasons, you sort of have to try that to start. I think, Grady Dick, Jamal Shed.
So just for clarity, by the way, the starters you mentioned, Jakob Poeltl, Scottie Barnes, Brandon Ingram, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly. That's the presumed starting 5 that you're going with. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Grady Dick, Jamal Shed, and Mamu, I would say, are definitely coming off the bench in their roles. Mamu as, a 4-5, Dick as a wing scorer / creator, and Jamal Shed as the backup point guard. And then I think you could go a few directions. Sort of what happens at 2-3 on the wing is most interesting to me. I think right now, if I had to pick just 2 guys, it would probably be Ochai Agbaji and then Colin Murray-Boyles, with Jacoby Walter having to earn those minutes. And that's just sort of a function. That's just sort of a function of like where they have guys and where they don't. But they could, at the same time, they could go small, not have Murray-Boyles start, in the rotation and, use Ingram and RJ as de facto power forwards at times and have Walter play instead of the rookie Colin Murray-Boyles. But if I had to bet, I think they'll keep things relatively positionally orthodox to start the season, and then see what's working and what's not. But I'd say that last spot whether comes down sort of to Murray-Boyles, Jonathan Mobo, who we haven't mentioned here, and Jacoby
the famous
Walter.
Jonathan Mobo between us, right? At the trade deadline, we hashed it out over. Actually, at the draft, we hashed it out over. Does Colin Murray-Boyles is his spot.
Yeah, the future. Yeah, what does this mean for the future of Jonathan
Mobo? Right.
Yeah. Did that part of the podcast really spike when you look back at the numbers?
It did. It absolutely did. Everybody was intrigued by Jonathan Mobo. It's interesting you detail it out that way, because I actually had a completely different rotation, and it's funny because that's the way this stuff works. Neither of us will be right in this, just because of injuries, because of, any type of different stuff that the Raptors coaching staff envisions. Much smarter people than you and me will be able to kind of sift through what they think is what they want for this Raptors team. I had Grady Dick and Jacoby Walter kind of baked into the rotation, just because I think Jacoby fits into what the Raptors want to do defensively, especially at the point of attack. And if they're leaning on, hey, let's force turnovers, let's get out in transition, let's pressure the ball like crazy. We just saw the Oklahoma City Thunder and Indiana Pacers get to the finals and one team win a championship just off crazy ball pressure. I think the Raptors want to lean on that. That's what they were successful at last season. And Jacoby was one of the best just on ball defenders on the team last year. I think that's where they lean. And I'm curious where Jamal Shed plays a role in this team, because they do have other ball handlers now. I think Brandon Ingram will have a ball handling responsibility. Scottie Barnes, like you mentioned, unselfish guy who will be able to handle the ball. Emmanuel quickly can do those things as well. They like to play off of their bigs. And so I'm curious to see whether Shed might be a guy who gets the short end of the stick here, and then they lean on some of their wingy shooting type of guys in an Abaji, in maybe even a battle at times, just to provide that extra floor spacing for some of their creators to work. That's my pitch on how the Raptors rotation look.
Yeah, in terms of spacing, and I still think that's a weakness for this team. And when we say spacing, we just essentially mean shooting.
Yeah.
That would go a long way to address that as well as they can with the guys they currently have. I just think what you said about Walter sort of applies with less size to Shed as well. They love the way he guards the ball. They love the way he pressures. I think that sort of summer league crew, second, the last year's rookies take their cues from him.
Almost won the championship, man.
Yeah. As a charismatic leader. And look, I me not having Jacoby Walter in the my theoretical rotation beyond not mattering at all shouldn't color my long-term view of him. I'm actually pretty damn high on what he could be if the pieces fall into place. But just between Dick, Walter, and Agbaji, they just sort of have one too many guys at that slot. And you're right, all of them could play, and they could choose to be less traditional positionally. We could see that. It wouldn't shock me. But right now, sort of knowing what I know about how the Raptors tend to operate, that wouldn't be my guess. And to be able to get one of the younger guys, whether it's Murray Boyles or Walter, just a more regular role maybe with Raptors 905 and more minutes. And when the need comes, they're more ready. That makes a bit more sense to me, but let's face it, the need will probably come immediately. So
that's true. Injuries will it's just the way it's worked over the last couple of years. And to your point about Murray Boyles, that is how they've operated over the last couple of years with their rookies. Generally, it's hey, you'll get minutes, you'll be sent to the 905, and a few months later, you'll be in the rotation. Now, to be fair, those have been in losing seasons. And I wonder if the strategy and approach kind of changes this year as they head towards what they want to. They want to be competitive. They want to win basketball games this year. I still believe Scottie Barnes.
Change of pace.
I know. I can't wait to watch a team that's trying to win. It's very interesting. I still believe Scottie Barnes is the best player on this team. Do you believe that as well?
Yeah. I think when you're looking at offense and defense, he is the biggest. He makes the biggest impact on a nightly basis.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the ceiling of what this team can be for all of what Brandon Ingram provides in terms of needs as a scorer and, basically another ball handler, I think Scottie can really elevate the ceiling of this team depending on just how much he plays up to that contract, both on the defensive end and offensively, how much more he can squeeze out of the quote unquote 0 level score narrative that was there for him earlier. Who's the player that's most likely to get traded this season? Because we talked about a lot of guys just now, and there's the financial crunch of this team as well. They're operating above the tax right now. Who's the most likely player to get traded?
So there are two names that pop up to me, and to what you just mentioned, I believe they're a few million over the luxury tax threshold right now, or they're projected to be.
Yeah.
Which is, kind of insane for
funny position to be in for a team
that they're in.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think if you're looking long term, it's RJ Barrett. And that would, sort of stink because he came home. He's really improved his, I would say, his offensive decision making. He certainly showed signs of being a really good playmaker, in addition to cutting out sort of a little of the fat of his mid-range game, and those floaters. He gets to the rim a bit more often than he used to, instead of settling for those sort of 10 to 12 foot push shots, which he can make, but aren't the world's most efficient shots. He has 2 years, I want to say about 54 total left on his deal.
It's about like 28 and 30 in the final year, something like that. Yeah.
And when you look at the long-term composition of this team, if Barnes and Ingram are your guys, paying, thinking about extending him, he will be or is extension eligible, and thinking about his next deal, does it fit into this, the long-term structure of this deal? This team, I'm not sure. And as nice as his development has been, unfortunately for RJ, and maybe not entirely his own fault, he hasn't shown that he impacts winning yet. And you could say the same, obviously, for the most part, for Scottie Barnes. But I think, obviously, on the defensive end, there's no question which guy is the more serious difference maker there. If they're looking to just duck the cap, or I should say the tax, Ochai Agbaji jumps out just as he's in the last year of his rookie scale contract. He's a nice player who some team might want the restricted rights on. And as we just outlined, like, the Raptors have Grady Dick and Jacoby Walter. And if it's time to pay Agbaji and they don't really have room for it, that's somebody you could trade into a team's mid-level exception if they still have it to use. And it's a relatively easy trade to make, just in terms of the cap mechanics of it all. So those are the two names that jump out. If disaster hits, obviously
things can change.
You could probably put any name in there almost, but right now it's Barrett in a bigger move, or Agbaji sort of in a smaller move for me.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated to see how this Barrett situation shakes out, because he has had his 2 best seasons of his career in Toronto. And the fact that he is a hometown kid, I do wonder how much they try to massage the situation, because he will be extension eligible in October. And part of that, I think part of the conversation is how he looks next to Ingram and Scottie, how much he adheres to a different role. Because I think last year, with the injuries, he was just given so much usage and so much opportunity as an on-ball guy. I think his role will be similar to how, in the short amount of time, Pascal Siakam and RJ Barrett were on the same team. When Pascal was there, RJ was more of a off-ball cutter, a guy who was moving in space, working in transition. If he can do that, I think there's a world where there's a long-term relationship with the Raptors and Barrett. But cost is a major factor here too, right?
Have you memorized those 2.5 Pascal Siakam, Emmanuel Quickly, RJ Barrett, Scottie Barnes weeks?
They were awesome.
I remember almost nothing about those weeks except counting down to the Siakam trade. So
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
No, I your point is well made, and that's despite like it not being, they want to be more competitive. It's not the most urgent thing in the world, but I think there is some burden of proof immediately on this core in terms of they're going to have to make some pretty big decisions. And if, they can gel quickly, I think, like you said, there's a chance that there's a workable solution with a guy who wants to be here, obviously, who loves playing at home, who loves being part of Canada basketball, and, a player for obvious reasons, and good reasons, who the fan base loves, but I think it's also fair to be skeptical about what this all looks like together. If it does come to, the Raptors sure could use a less scoring-minded threat in that fifth starting spot. Does it make sense to have somebody that highly paid off the bench? Right. RJ Barrett would seem to be the number one candidate to move if they decide to go that way. Not a lot of teams operate like that, so then it becomes difficult. So we'll see with this presumptive starting five. They're going to have to show them. They're like, they've got a half season to show that they can be a thing. If not, some real questions are going to come.
Yeah, the rubber meets the road here for this team at this point. And it's a little bit unfair because they haven't had a ton of time to play together either. Again, we have not seen Brandon Ingram play with this core at all. So there are so many unknowns, which I think I understand where some of the skeptics are coming from, in the sense that we don't know. The Raptors can't hang their hat on anything other than the fact that they project to be a decently good defensive team next year.
I was about to say that. What, you can't hang your hats on the second half defensive numbers, the post All-Star break defensive numbers,
well, okay,
which we're just assuming are going to carry over?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, let's talk about this. What do you think the outcome is for this team next year? Like, given some of the skepticism, given we don't really know how this team meshes or coalesces together, you have a crystal ball in May and June. Where do they land in the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, I have a tough time putting them in the top six. I think that is sort of their ceiling, that 5-6 range. I think they're one of any number of teams that can find their ways there. Most obvious thing in the world, good health, plus, some good chemistry and Brandon Ingram, fitting in well. And sure, this team is pretty talented. But I just think it's not a long time and not a long runway for a very questionable offensive fit. I think some of the criticisms against Ingram have been unfair at times, but I don't think it's unreasonable to say that he doesn't play or hasn't played the way that Darko Rajakovic talks about the Raptors playing. And so I think in that way, it's a huge year for Darko Rajakovic, in that, sure, he's got some teams with low expectations to buy into a style of play, but what happens when your expectations creep up, your caliber of talent creeps up, and you have to sell them on playing a bit differently. Like, that didn't go great in his first year, which admittedly I would not pin on him whatsoever. Yeah. Long story short, my gut is this is a 9-10 team. Somewhere in that range, high end, 5, low end, the bottom falls out and they're 12th or something.
Yeah, no, that's the crazy part, is you just listed 5 to 12, and that's
but I think we could do that for a lot of teams, right? I understand that. Yeah. I think they are, in my heart of hearts, I think they're closer to missing the playoffs than finishing sixth, I think, is what I would say.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of factors to this. To me, I think we will have a decent season from their starting five if health is permitting. I think that will, that's always a question. But if they are healthy, their starting five should be able to win their minutes. The big question for me is, and to your point about Darko Rajakovic, is like how they work out this rotation. If some of those younger guys can really develop some outlier skills to be better than what they are right now. If Grady Dick, who had a really awesome start to a season last year, can do that consistently for an entire year, then you're looking at a different story. If, Colin Murray-Boyles has an impressive rookie season and is really dominant defensively out the gate, then you might have a different look, a different approach to what the long-term vision of this Raptors team is. But I would probably agree with you. I think I'm a little bit higher, but I also am looking at the rest of the Eastern Conference, as you are, and saying there's a world in which this team, given the pressures that they have to win and compete, goes the extra mile compared to some other teams. Like Boston might not be as interested in going all in February and March. Indiana maybe does, but who knows what happens with the Philadelphia 76ers. The Chicago Bulls just re-signed Josh Giddey. We'll see how good that team is. It's just, there's so many question marks in the Eastern Conference, and I think the Raptors have their own set of question marks. It just depends on, again, health and how much they like playing with each other.
Yeah, and that's where, this team had a great summer last year. I roll my eyes a little bit at that, but I earnestly believe it. That group really liked playing together. But that stuff, that ephemeral stuff, only matters
means so much. Yeah.
Darko Rajakovic has a job on his hands to make sure this team can hit the ground running. Injuries happen, and that just won't be as much of an excuse this year because some big financial decisions, even if you're not facing free agents or anything, but just in terms of the salary structure of this league, those decisions are coming. And, it's just, this is not the salary structure of a team that is battling to, win a play-in game. That this team is being paid as if they are at least going to, get some home revenue in the playoffs, and that's at least. So they got to be that.
Yeah, absolutely. Rubber meets the road type of season for basically everybody in the Raptors organization. We will see what happens. Eric Koreen, appreciate you as always. Thank you very much for joining us here to talk about the Raptors.
No problem. Always a treat, Tess.